Hey, I'm Nishant. Today we are going to talk about interactivity in the lectures. Why is that? Well, because remember that survey that I was talking about in the previous video? So, in that, I think there were like about 130 responses, and out of them, um, quite a few of them said that they liked lecturers who engaged in the classes and who kind of had that interactivity going on in the class. And that is exactly why I'm going to talk about interactivity today. So let's see what we have here. In the response, right, we have like several of them saying, so the question was, what do you think about your favorite lecture? Um, and what is so special about their teaching style? And several people said that it's their way of engaging. They were interactive and engaging. See, I have highlighted these words here: engaging, highlight, engaging, interactive, um, and so like quite a few of them said that they like that engagement happening in the class. Um, and that's why I'm going to speak about that. Um, so, hmm. So engagement is something that students seem to appreciate in the classes. All right, it's kind of working. It's why they are. It's why many of them appreciate the lecturers, and it's why many of them are there in the classes. Now, you may have noticed the word passionate appear a few times there, and I took a notice of that as well, but we're just gonna ignore that for the time being, and address that in probably a later video. But for now, let's just focus on interactivity. All right. So as an educator, if you find yourself talking too much, maybe you want to stop and have a look at what the students are doing. Maybe they're too much into their mobile phones because they're getting bored. Maybe they're dozing off. And the way one of the ways you could avoid this is by having an engaging lecture. Uh, Maybe you can have, for example, polls. All right. So let's talk about polls. Hashtag democracy. Um, so there's different kinds of polls that you can do. So let's go to polleverywhere.com. So the first one over here, it's the multiple choice questions, and it talks. So it's your typical thing. So you post, like, the author writes a question, and then you have like several responses to that, and then you can have your students go to the link and click on the appropriate response, and that's one way to engage. But so multiple choice questions, right? Mm, you post responses that you know are wrong, and then you have that one correct response, and students, you expect students to click on the right answer, and yeah, you kind of address as a lecturer why that answer is correct, and you move on. So uh, the flow of the lecture is pretty linear in that case. But then there's this word cloud, which you just post a question, and students respond um, accordingly, and then you have like a word cloud that appears on the screen. I think it's kind of live, so like as students are typing and they post it, you'd see the words kind of pop up as a word cloud, and that's kind of fun and interactive. And then as a lecturer, you would have this opportunity to address all, maybe not all, but some of the responses, and there would be some responses that you didn't really expect to be there. So using the word cloud, you might get certain responses that are kind of unexpected, because the response would be based on the student's understanding. And as a tutor, I think you are expected to address at least like a few top few of those responses, even if they are not correct, right? Because it basically reflects the students' thinking. And now there's like this Q&A thing. I think this is what one of the popular tutors, popular lecturers at computer science education, computer science and engineering department uses. So he's a pretty new lecturer. Like he just started lecturing this year, and he uses Polleverywhere, and then like he just goes into the classroom and starts like opens this Polleverywhere screen, and then students just start posting questions, all right? And you would have like the top few responses appear on the screen. Like I think there's a limit of 10 or 20, and he would just go and answer those kind of queries or doubts. And this is kind of a really open way of lecturing, I think. As a lecturer, I think you need to know the topic really well, or that's at least my understanding. If you are using this kind of poll method, where you ask students to, post questions and then upvote or downvote, and students expect you to go through at least the top few ones, and then your lecture structure kind of remains really open. Like the direction your lecture can take would be really open, and you can't really plan ahead for this kind of scenario, because there's always like unexpected questions. There would be some obvious ones, of course, but then there would be unexpected questions that would pop up on the screen, and you would have to address those. Yeah, so I think the Q&A and open-ended, they are pretty similar. I think the Q&A ones, they kind of give you the option to upvote and downvote, while the open-ended ones, they just like list the responses. I'm not really sure how this works, but pretty sure like the lecturer I was talking about at CSE at UNSW, he uses one of these. One of the challenges of having the Q&A or like the open-ended type polls in the classroom is that you get certain responses which are inappropriate, because obviously like when you have the polls appear on the screen, like the questions, the responses that the students have posted on the screen, you would obviously have the trolls and the memes on the screen, because students love to have like a laugh. I mean, who doesn't, right? So you would have those kind of responses, and sometimes it's like just easy to let go of them. Like there would be some responses like, hey, I think the lecture is boring, or hey, I think I need to grab a pizza, or something on those lines. But then you would have some really inappropriate ones, and those could be like, I feel so bad right now because of the assignment that I want to kill myself, right? So how do you address those kind of responses? Now, depending on your personality, I guess you might just brush it off, or you might get really upset. It really depends, right? And it's kind of a really big challenge of having those kind of open-ended questions. Now, the way you could solve this is by asking students to flag certain questions as inappropriate, like have certain people or certain volunteers in the class and ask them to flag the inappropriate questions, and just like so the class, the screen wouldn't kind of show all those responses. Maybe you could have like sections of related questions to the lecture, and then a fun kind of section where the lecturer could just go and then just have a look through them, just for fun. But yeah, that's kind of a major challenge. Now, with the multiple choice questions, I don't see much of a challenge, because the lecture structure kind of remains linear, and yeah, and the word cloud, maybe you could have trolls there as well. So as you move towards the more open-ended sort of questions or open-ended sort of polls, you would have a greater risk of having trolls or letting trolls in the class participate and have the responses. So there should be kind of a filter. I don't think Polls Everywhere offers any filter as such, but like the Q&A has an upvote and downvote button. I think the problem arises also when you have like a lecture recording happening. So when you have Echo 360, like UNSW has Echo 360 lecture recordings for many of its courses, and when you have that kind of stuff going on, or when the lecture is being live streamed elsewhere, because students can just sit at home and then watch the live stream of the lecture. It's really difficult at times to let go of these things, and if you have like a really bad reaction to some of these responses, some of the trolls, you I don't know. I mean, it might be trouble. I think that's where the lecture structure is headed, where you kind of encourage the students to participate in the classroom, because else they could just go home and watch YouTube or Udemy or LinkedIn Learning. In fact, UNSW offers like free LinkedIn Learning subscription, previously known as Linda, I think. Yeah. So UNSW offers free Linda subscription for its students, and that makes me think, right? Why do we have lectures if the content is already available? Like you can find memes on Facebook where students kind of indicate that they like learning from YouTubers instead of lecturers right before their exams, and that's kind of the reality. I think the role of lecturers at universities is less about explaining and more about getting students talking in the class, or like getting the conversation going in the classroom, and or maybe like having students get pumped up and excited about the topic instead of just explaining the topic, because there's so many sources. Like, let's face it, right? You may not be the best person to talk about that topic, and there would be someone better out there explaining the topic for free on other sources, or there might be books available for free, like PDF files available for free, and students might just go through that. Why should they come to the lecture? I think the role of the lecture is to get students pumped up, excited about the topic, and like get a conversation started in the classroom, so that the students can go home and learn by themselves. Yeah. So, thanks for watching my video. This was just a discussion about interactivity in the classroom using polls. I might try to address other issues later on as we go ahead. Maybe you can have a look at my blog or my Twitter, and I'll post a link to that. And that's where I post kind of the latest stuff, or where I actually think out and write stuff down instead of just kind of blabbering shit. So yeah, hope to see you in the next video.